Begin Self-Publishing, episode 148. May King Mistakes.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
In this episode, I talk again to May King Tsang about her book writing journey, and it's mainly a story of not much progress. So now let's get over to the interview. Hello, May King. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I understand.
Great.
You've been ill for a little bit, but you're on the mend.
I am, yes. Plenty of radio mums covered. And then, yes, I actually, because I've got a big gig coming up, the biggest gig of my career to date, I thought I would go to the pharmacy as well and get a few cough medicines and lozenges and that kind of stuff as well to top it up. So, yeah.
Okay. So, you know the question I'm going to ask you. How are you getting on with your book writing project?
My book writing project? What? Am I writing a book?
Yes, you are.
Well, I don't know if you or your listeners remember the title of my book. The title of the book is From Making Mistakes to Making It Happen. And I have to admit, Tim, this week I've been prone to making mistakes and haven't really progressed that much in my book, I'm afraid.
So progress-wise, have you made any progress since the last time I interviewed you?
I have, yes. So I think at the last chats that we had, I think I completed 2 chapters and there's 15, so I've got 13 to go. And I've completed another chapter. So I really wanted to sort of drive it forward and get, 3 done this time. But that hasn't happened because, as you mentioned, I've been ill. And I've also had a lot of client work come my way, which has obviously taken priority. And so with a combination of the client work, which I love, of course, and being ill, and also making a concerted effort to rest so that I can get better quicker, it's been a real slowdown, I'm afraid. But that said, I think about my book every day. So even though I may not necessarily write stuff, I do sort of think about, what I'm going to feature in some of the chapters, the ones that I've been concentrating on. And also, I think about the layout, which I mentioned in the last episode, that I probably spent a little time, which Tim, you mentioned, was a form of procrastination about the design of it. But I think that, I've been thinking about the format of it. So I don't think I went into too much detail last time, but because this is a part biographical book, and also with the intention of teaching people about running a business, I need to think about the chronological order of how I actually write the book. And so that has been sort of been at the forefront of my mind, of the chronological order, but also actually the format and the structure. Because ultimately, I would like people to see the mistakes that I've made, but also the successes that I've made, where I've made it happen, so that people can learn from the mistakes that I've made and hope that they won't make them, and guide them guide them away from the mistakes I've made, hopefully, so that they are able to make it happen straight away.
Okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with basically changing the structure of your book as you go along, as long as you're mindful that it's going to delay things and or change potentially what your plan and things is for the book. But on the other hand, sometimes you can think of something and you think this is really going to make a big change and make the book so much better as you're in the process of writing the book. So I wouldn't say oh no, don't make any changes, and you have to keep everything to the same level as what it was. but also don't use it as a squirrel to basically stop you from writing anything. So, yeah. So, I mean, it's like it's hard to tell because you've been unwell what rate of progress you would be having if you were well. It's probably too slow anyway at the moment. Though, of course, the thing about too slow is if you get the project completed, then is it ever too slow? If you get it done by sort of December or something like that, that's going to be late. But on the other hand, if it's complete, right, really, who cares in a way?
Well, that's exactly right. And in fact, I can't remember who it was, but I was listening to somebody, so memorable, can't remember the name. And it took them, but it is someone that I hold in high regard. And it took them 2 years to write the book. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. So although I have been beating myself up a little bit because I've been ill and because of the work that's been happening, at the same time, I kept reminding myself, but do you know what, May King? You progressed further along in this book than any other book, any other writing attempts that you've had in the last 7 years. And I think in the first episode, we talked about how I have about 7 or 10 different titles on 7 different Google Docs, where I had a brainwave and so I wanted to write about it. And then they've just ended up remaining as 1 pages with nothing that has progressed because I haven't prioritized my time on it. And now that from making mistakes to making it happen, now that this book is, we do have a deadline, or I have a deadline, I'm accountable to you, which is great. I've got 4 chapters written, which is way more than I've ever written. So, I'm not going to beat myself up. And there's a reason why I'm ill. It's probably because I've worked too hard or, that kind of stuff. And these things just happen. So at the start of my realization that I'd slowed down, I was kind of beating myself up. But recently I've been reflecting and thinking, no, actually it's okay. Life does get in the way sometimes and those things happen, So, but yeah, I have progressed even further than I ever have. So I am grateful for that.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few things that I would say in terms of basically book writing and book planning and just getting books done. One thing is that the problem with taking 2 years to write a book, in terms of the actual book writing process, I'm not saying 2 years in terms of researching a book and then writing it, or 2 years where you've spent 3 months writing a book and then you've got like 18 months of editing or something. That's not quite the same. But actually physically writing, 2 years writing a draft of a book is that you will get this kind of disjointed feeling. It's going to need a lot more editing and things to cover up the fact that you will start writing something and then by the time you get onto the next bit, you would have forgotten what you already wrote and you might write something that totally contradicts it, or you repeat things. And I mean, again, it depends a lot on the book. And certainly from a fiction point of view, which is where I started writing fiction books, you can forget exactly what the hell you've just done. And it makes it really hard to pick something up again. Now, having a plan helps a lot in that regard because you've at least got some bullet points or some description of like what the chapter is supposed to be about. So if you can complete a chapter, say, each time you have like a little writing spurt, so to speak, then that's good. Because there's going to be less crossover between the chapters. And that was what I found really useful, Tim. Sorry to interrupt there. The fact that you talked about writing a tiny paragraph at the top of each chapter to remind yourself what it is you're going to write, and I found that incredibly useful. And as you say, if you do have time away from your book and then you go back into it, it's almost like you need to start again in order to continue. But because I do know exactly what I'm going to write at each chapter, it means that when I do prioritize and I do make the time, I can go in, launch straight in, and then write a chapter, which is what I've done with all 3 of the chapters. Actually, one of the pieces of advice that always is knocking around in my head, Tim, is that you said that if it was at all possible for everybody who's thinking of writing a book to set
a time away, like 2 weeks away, ideally, just to get to concentrate solely on writing the book, then it would, the magic happens. And so I really wanted to. So those words resonated in my head for a while, and I thought, right, okay, I've got to find 2 weeks, and I just couldn't find them. But what I have done is I deliberately tagged on a few days after Social Media Marketing World. And so I will be, for 5 days, I think it is, I will be locking myself away in a hotel in sunny San Diego and just finishing off some of those chapters. And plus, I've got a lovely flight from Manchester to London to San Diego. So I'll be able to do some work there as well, and also on the flight back as well. So although I don't have a full 2 weeks, available, I do have about 5 days and maybe 6 days if you include the travel to and from. No, 5.5 days, I would say. So, but I had aimed to, set 1 day aside each weekend or 1 day in the week, because weekends don't really exist to business owners. Yeah. At least 1 day a week where I was going to set aside and do some stuff. Haven't quite managed that yet, but it is something that I really want to push, because I do want to finish this book this year.
Yeah. I mean, another point that I would say, which is a positive thing, is that when you get into the habit of writing chapters, like one after another, you will get quicker at doing it. So when you get your flow going and you're like writing on the plane or whatever, the next chapter you write after that in the hotel room or whatever beforehand will be quicker than the one before. Okay. So, I mean, a lot depends on the chapters don't need to be evenly sized. Mm. There will be some where you just write shorter, some where you have longer. You probably have some idea in your head about the relative sizes of the later chapters in your book. So it may be the case that you're actually closer to finishing it than you think, as long as you can put the time in to actually get there. So it might be 2025 rather than 2020 when you actually finish.
Cheeky.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. You get into habit. You get into this rhythm of writing. I mean, I've noticed that. I mean, 3 of my books I did in NaNoWriMo, which is this US based, we have it in the UK as well, where people try and write a book in a month. So in November, there's a whole community of like novel writers, and I've done it and won it 3 times, where you write 50,000 words in November. And it's the accountability thing, really, because you share your word count publicly. So it can certainly be done. You can certainly, but each of those I had already had a plan written already with like the description of what I was going to do in each chapter. So I think having a plan helps, because otherwise you get to your chapter and you're like, well, what on earth is this chapter about? And that's where the whole thinking and you're thinking about the book and stuff comes in. So you can certainly write quickly once you've got a plan, as long as your plan describes what's going to be in that chapter of the book. So I think you may be able to catch up quite a bit quicker than maybe you think. So,
great.
So maybe the 7th of June or whenever we said you get the book done, it's still possible. I mean, you don't know. Okay. So I wouldn't think, you're going to be late. If you're late, you're late. But as long as you can keep going, because the reason I try and encourage people to do a plan and write as fast as possible is it's so easy to just put it down and never come back to it. And then when you come back to it, especially if you're in the middle of a chapter or something like that, you're like, I can't be bothered to reread what I wrote, and you end up procrastinating and you never put the book project up again. So this is so that's why there is really no time limit to writing the book, but you need to keep the progress going, because if you stop, then there's a big chance you'll never come back to it. It'll be just another thing in the drawer. I mean, I had I probably still got them somewhere, probably like 5 or 6 half finished, well, not even quarter finished novels. Right. And that's because I didn't have a plan for them. And I wrote brilliant stuff, and then I was like, what on earth happens now? It's like, I've no idea. So,
have you tried mashing 2 books together, see what happens?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff I could do. I mean, there's a screenplay I actually finished which I then started rewriting, and it's half rewritten. But I don't want to go into a thing of pitching screenplays. This was one of the things I switched over from, because I didn't really know too much about self-publishing.
Right.
But as soon as I realised you can self-publish fiction and you don't need to go through a middleman, I switched over from writing screenplays, which I actually think I'm better at writing screenplays because I'm a very visual person in terms of how I write, in terms of fiction anyway.
Right.
Switched over to writing novels, and it was, it's quite a different way of thinking. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that line.
Now, in the last time we spoke, I think I fired a gazillion questions at you because I was sort of thinking ahead, jumping ahead, and so on. And of course, I'm nowhere near that yet. So I probably need to sort of rewind it back. Now, I think I may have asked this question last chat, because we asked so many questions, I'm going to ask again. So, when I think that it's the time to start thinking about choosing someone to look at to proofread it, I suppose that would be the first. I mean, at what point do I sort of look at hiring somebody? I mean, is it when I'm 3/4 of the book forward, or when I finished it, or halfway through, or what are your recommendations?
Well, knowing editors, I know a lot of them. I generally not really used many of them because I tended to get my mum to edit my books. But the advice I've always been given is the more lead time you can have, the better, because the very best editors and people are booked up months in ahead. So if you leave it right to the last minute, then you're going to have the problem of who's available. Now that's not so bad for proofreading, but when we're talking about the more the editing process, which is more about having somebody look at the structure of your book and basically how you phrase things and seeing if there's any common so example, if I say at the front of every sentence in the whole chapter or something along those lines, while that is not grammatically wrong, it's annoying to the reader. And that's the sort of thing that a good editor will pick up on. And similarly, if you can find an editor who has edited your kind of non-fiction book before, so I don't really know what you would classify, but sort of autobiographical self-help or something like that.
Yeah.
Then that is going to help because they'll know the kind of things that they'll say, maybe you should include a case study here or something along those lines.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, on the other hand, if you book in an editor, say for May or something, then, that is another accountability thing because
that's true.
You'll have to move it. But if you do, you may get into problems if you then sort of slip and they may say, well, we're not available till September or something along those lines.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the flip side of it. But there's nothing to stop you looking for editors now. And I know there'll be a couple at Atomicon. You can talk to, one of them's fiction, but one of them does non-fiction books. And they may have recommendations of people they know. And then you can just start sort of seeing how much people cost, what they can do. I mean, editing is labor intensive and expensive. And it isn't just proofreading. I mean, proofreading is one level. I mean, the majority of books by people that we know are largely, a lot of them are just proofread. But editing can make a big difference to a book, especially the first book that you write, because it'll give you, the more books you write, the more you know about the structure of how books should determine, because you found out in your previous books from user comments and the like. So it may be the case that once you start getting a bit better and you're thinking well, am I making progress here? That's when you start looking for editors and start approaching people and say, when are you available? And you can add that as an accountability thing.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good idea. So there's a couple of editors coming to the event soon, which is Atomicon you mentioned. Although by the time this has gone out, Atomicon will have already finished, I suppose.
Yes. But I'm talking to you now. I'm talking to you now at this time, which is before this is aired, and it's you I'm talking to. So. Yeah, for anybody else, they're not going to be able to go to Atomicon, but you will be because we're still in the present day in this interview.
Right. Okay.
This whole time
Okay,
shift thing's a bit meta, isn't it? Really. But.
No, but it's good to know. It's good to know that there's going to be a few editors to talk to at TomCon, and that'll be great. And so I think that's a great idea to really. I mean, I've already been accountable to you, although I didn't quite manage what I wanted to achieve by this talk. But by being accountable to two people would be amazing, actually. So I think that might be a good approach to go. And I'll have a chat with these editors. So that's a great idea. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, have you got anything else you want to ask? So.
Yeah. So as I say, in the last chapter, I sort of went really, really ahead of myself. I guess the next question is really, what would be my my 2 steps going forward? So that I'm aware about where I am in the planning stage, I suppose. So. You mentioned that I guess my next step would be to, consider looking at an editor. There's different types of editors, which we talked about at length at the last talk, last chapter. What would be the next step after that then?
Well, you've got the cover of the book, but that doesn't necessarily need to take that long to get designed and done. But
right.
That's usually less time than the editing process. But again, that's something you might want to consider. You can do that at any time. The advantage to getting a cover done early is that you can then start using it in promotions and things like that. And it makes everybody think that the book's finished, even before when it is.
Yes.
The other option, and I've said it to a few people, is that they're pre-designed covers where basically there's a designer called demonza.com. They were quite expensive. It costs sort of $500 to get a custom design done.
Oh my.
But they do pre-designed covers, and it's largely for fiction writers. But my social media networking book, that's a pre-designed demonza cover, and that was like $200.
Oh wow, right, okay.
So
it's a very good cover too.
Yeah, they basically say they have like a whole site full of basically covers with this book title here kind of thing. And then you say, you buy it and you specify what your book title is. And then you've got that ebook cover.
Right.
And there are cheaper companies than Demonza that do pre-designed book covers. So,
okay. Well, one of your other guests on your podcast, Ben Roberts, I saw a sneaky peek of his design, the front cover of his book, and I thought it was amazing. Do you have any idea where he had that done?
Well, you could listen to the podcast episode where you described it. He went for a local designer in Wales. He's very much a kind of homegrown. It's somebody who's like a design student. I mean, that's another option. I mean, you could ask Ben to contact the woman, I think it was a woman, or the guy who did his book cover, and ask them to do yours. And I don't think they were particularly expensive because this is like their first design brief, really.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's designers available for all sorts of costs and price ranges. There is a special skill to book cover design, which is slightly different. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, well, if you're saving money, you get a cover you like, then go for it. I mean,
could you expand on that a little bit? And when you said that the design cover is quite an important aspect. So, I'm sorry, you mentioned that it's a skill to be able to execute that. So can you go into that in a bit more detail?
Well, yes. I mean, in my experience, it helps if the person creating, and this is maybe an argument for not buying a pre-designed book cover, but somebody who knows Amazon and the kind of book covers that work for a particular genre or particular type of book. And also because a lot of it is to how your book looks as a miniature, because on the Amazon site, you'll have, for the ebooks, you have tiny little miniature versions of the covers that so you're seeing like the charts and things. And that's where Demonza covers and things like that are very good because they're very striking, even shrunk down. And things like legibility of the fonts so that you can see them from a distance. And I mean, if you've got some fancy like May King Tsang in kind of weird cursive font that may look lovely on a full-size book, but it'd be totally unreadable on a small, shrunk-down thing on a TV, on a monitor when you're looking at Amazon. And people think, what the hell is that book about? So there is a skill to it in terms of how the fonts are laid out and things like that.
Okay.
Which, I mean, it's like, how much does it matter? Not necessarily too much. I mean, there's kind of hybrid approaches and things like that where you get the front cover done and then you do the rest of it yourself, or you take one book cover and you just, I mean, with my first time travel books, I bought the first cover for the first book and then I just used Photoshop to change the colours on it for the later ones and the fonts.
You naughty boy.
Well, it saved me a lot of cash, actually. So there are options for doing it.
Get him sued.
Yeah. And certainly, if you're going to have a range of books, then again, you can ask the designer, depending on like if it's a custom design or not. But even if it's a pre-book cover, you can say, can I have a version of the book cover without that book title on it? So I can get somebody else. You just pay like somebody on Fiverr to add in the same text for your next book and do like a bit of work so that if you've got a series of books, you can kind of just reuse the same cover you bought for like all of them. So you're making mistakes, making it happen book, and making even more mistakes and making it happen book or whatever. And you just do that as a process. So book covers are something to consider, but they can be done pretty quickly actually. So
okay. Well, I mean, I actually have in mind the kind of book cover I want. Maybe, I mean, I invested in myself and my business to have a brand Bible, as it were, written up. So this brand document outlines exactly what the May King Tea logo looks like. And so it's got some vibrant colours in it, really interesting shapes. And so I kind of wanted to use that as part of the cover because they're so vibrant. And you know this lovely lady already, Claire Jenks, who is amazing when it comes to design. And it's really funny, again, making mistakes. I, did my speaking gig last year in Cambridge, which you were also speaking at, Tim. And I thought, got my PowerPoint slides are pretty good. And I asked for feedback on my talk, which I always do. And I love receiving feedback. I'm not so interested in the positive stuff, but I'm more interested in the constructive stuff. I want to improve. I want to see where I went wrong, as it were, and see where I can improve. And one person came to me and said, well, your PowerPoint slides, they were okay, but they weren't brilliant. And I said, thank you very much for the feedback. Went home and cried for a week. No, I'm only kidding. But I approached Claire. Actually, we just got chatting, and she does their brand design. And I mentioned, can you do PowerPoint slides too? And she said, yeah. So, which was fantastic. And when she did it, oh my gosh, I just could not believe the huge difference that it made on my branding. I mean, admittedly, with my initial PowerPoint slides, which I delivered in Cambridge Social Day, it was a Google Slides template. Yeah. But it was using corporate colours, which I thought was, pretty swanky, pretty clever. Then after Claire had rebranded it so that I could use it to deliver talk in Birmingham this year, the change was just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So I kind of wanted to possibly use Claire, if she is available, to look at creating a book cover design, or maybe someone that she can highly recommend, because I think she is amazing.
Yeah, we'll certainly ask her then. I mean, if it's, she may either not do book covers, or she may not have done many before, or something along those lines. So it's kind of, I mean, if you've got somebody who's already done knows you and knows your design kind of ethos, then that's an ideal choice for a book cover designer.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I've kind of half completed one of the two tasks then.
Yeah.
He is burning Claire.
Yeah. So I think that's probably enough for you to be, I mean, there's things like marketing the book and formatting, but they're much further down the line, and you're nowhere near that really at the moment. So Those are the kind of biggest things to worry about. So I think we're probably done, he says, looking at the clock on the timer. Well, we start talking about what success means again, or going on some tangent. So,
Well, thank you so much for your time, Tim. Yeah, I think that, as I said in the last chapter, I just fired so many questions at you, but then, I think in reality, you know, when you think about what needs to happen, that can also sort of scare you into procrastination as well, because you go into a space of overwhelm, don't you? So I think, with this chapter, I did generally just want to learn the next few steps going forward so that I know where I'm going and I don't go into a place of overwhelm. So thank you for that.
Okay, well, it was great to have you on the show, and I'll talk to you probably I'll see you in person in a few days' time at Tomicon conference.
Yeah.
But on the show, you'll probably be back sometime in April, I guess. So,
Lovely.
Yep. So I shall talk to you then. Yep.
Great. We'll see you in April.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.